He stopped the car in the middle of nowhere, got out, and left two newborns on the ground without saying a word. But when a horse appeared out of nowhere, the dirt road wound through forgotten hills of Wyoming, where silence was broken only by the occasional whisper of wind through dried grass. In the fading light of a stifling late August afternoon, a black luxury car slowed to a stop, raising a cloud of golden dust under the setting sun. Everett Marshall, a man with refined features and cold, calculating eyes, emerged from the vehicle, with deliberate movements. His tailored suit seemed out of place against the rugged landscape of Eagle Valley. In the trunk lay two small wicker baskets that swayed gently as he carefully placed them on the ground. Inside, twin babies slept peacefully, unaware of the fate being imposed upon them. Everett didn't speak a word. He glanced briefly at the small, vulnerable bodies, then returned to his car without hesitation. Within seconds, he was gone, leaving, behind only the sound of tires on loose gravel. Minutes later, the silence was broken by the rhythmic trotting of a horse. A magnificent chestnut stallion appeared from behind the scrub brush, its coat gleaming like burnished copper in the dying light. The locals had nicknamed him Rusty, a wild horse known to roam freely throughout Eagle County. With alert eyes and determined movements, he approached the baskets. He sniffed the babies and neighed loudly, as if calling for help from an invisible someone. Then he abruptly turned and galloped in the opposite direction from the departed car, as if knowing exactly where to go. Hours later, under the darkness of night, 73-year-old Martha Wilson awakened to insistent neighing at her door. When she opened it, she found Rusty breathing heavily, staring at her with pleading eyes. Without understanding but guided by the intuition that life in the country had taught her to respect, she decided to follow him. He led her to the road where she found the two baskets. Her heart ached, but she didn't hesitate. She took the babies home, wrapped in the same light blankets in which they had been left. From that moment, the life of the elderly woman and of an entire community began to change. Martha had lived alone since her husband Robert passed away 5 years earlier. Their modest ranch on the outskirts of Eagle Valley had grown quiet in his absence. Their only daughter, Leanne, had moved to Seattle years ago, rarely visiting the small town where she'd grown up. The arrival of these twins would change everything. The first sign that this wasn't an abandonment born of desperation came when Martha found, hidden under the lining of one of the baskets, a small envelope containing papers. The documents had names and seals that Martha recognized. They belonged to the Blackwells, one of the most influential families in the region, known for their wealth and power over local decisions. This wasn't an act of desperation, but of convenience. Martha decided not to immediately turn over the documents. She kept them hidden, fearing that exposing them might put the children at risk. "Who are you, little ones?" Martha whispered as she gently bathed the babies in her kitchen sink. A boy and a girl, both with wisps of golden hair and eyes the color of a summer sky. They couldn't have been more than 3 weeks old. The girl had a small birthmark, shaped like a crescent moon, on her left shoulder. "I'll call you Daniel and Diana," she decided, the names of her parents coming naturally to her lips. Daniel and Diana Wilson, for now at least. Life continued in relative silence until, weeks later, Martha's cabin was consumed by a suspicious fire. Nothing was proven, but she felt it was a warning. The twins were with her at her neighbor's house when it happened, a blessing that left Martha shaken but resolute. She decided to move to an abandoned farmhouse on the outskirts of the village, where she continued to raise the babies with the support of Rusty, who never left her side. The animal, once seen as wild and elusive, became a silent guardian, attentive to any movement around them. The morning after the fire, Sheriff Tom Dawson arrived at the neighbor's house where Martha was staying. "Martha, I don't want to alarm you, but that fire, it doesn't look natural," he said, his weathered face creased with concern. "I know, Tom," Martha replied, bouncing little Diana on her knee while Daniel slept in a makeshift crib nearby. "You got any enemies I should know about?" the sheriff asked, half joking. Martha thought about the documents hidden in her sewing basket, the birth certificates with the Blackwell family seal, the private hospital records, the strange non-disclosure agreement with a signature that looked forced. She thought about how Richard Blackwell, the family's patriarch, had given her a strange look at the general store last week, as if seeing right through her. "No enemies, Tom, just an old stove that probably gave out," she lied, her gaze steady despite the fear churning in her stomach. That evening, as Martha rocked the twins to sleep in her neighbor's spare bedroom, Rusty appeared at the window, his intelligent eyes seeming to communicate understanding. The next day, he led her to the abandoned Davidson farm 3 miles outside town, a place with a sturdy old house that had stood empty for years, but with a roof that didn't leak and walls that would keep out the Wyoming winter. "This will do just fine," Martha told Rusty, as if the horse could understand every word. Perhaps he could, for he nickered softly and nudged her shoulder with his velvet nose. Within days, with help from a few trusted neighbors, Martha had moved what little remained of her belongings to the farmhouse. The twins seemed to thrive in the new space, growing stronger each day. Rusty made himself at home in the old barn, coming and going as he pleased, but always returning, always watching. The arrival of Catherine Morgan, a young social worker, brought a new challenge. Interested in the well-being of the children, she began investigating their origin. Martha, torn between trust and fear, revealed part of the truth, and together they began a careful search for information. "Mrs. Wilson, I'm just trying to understand," Catherine said during her second visit. "2 babies appear out of nowhere with no formal adoption process, no paperwork filed. I want to help, but I need to know more." Martha studied the young woman's earnest face. At 32, Catherine was new to Eagle Valley, with none of the entanglements that came from a lifetime in a small town. Perhaps she could be trusted. "I think these children belong to someone powerful," Martha said finally. "Someone who doesn't want them found." Catherine's eyes widened. "The Blackwells?" she guessed, lowering her voice even though they were alone in Martha's kitchen. Martha neither confirmed nor denied, but her silence spoke volumes. Catherine took a deep breath, her professional demeanor momentarily shaken. "Mrs. Wilson, if the Blackwells are involved, we need to be extremely careful. They practically own half this county," Catherine warned, her voice barely above a whisper. In parallel, the local newspaper published an image taken by chance by a resident, Rusty standing beside the twins as they lay on a blanket in the yard, which raised rumors and attracted unwanted attention. The photo, innocuous to most, appeared on the 3rd page of the Eagle Valley Gazette with the caption, "Wild horse tamed by twin babies." The community, previously neutral, began to divide in opinion. Some believed the babies were sent by God and protected by Rusty. Others saw the situation as a threat to the established order, particularly those with ties to the Blackwell family. "It's unnatural," Marianne Blackwell, Richard's wife, commented loudly at the town's Sunday service. "A wild animal shouldn't be around children. What is Martha Wilson thinking?" But others, like Edith Parker, who ran the general store, defended Martha. "That horse has more sense than half the people in this town," she declared. "And Martha Wilson has been caring for others her whole life. If anyone can raise those babies right, it's her." The pressure increased when Roger Stevens, a former employee of the Blackwell family, appeared one evening at Martha's door offering money for her to give up the babies. $20,000, Mrs. Wilson, he said, his voice smooth as oil. "Enough to rebuild your old house and then some. All you have to do is let these children go to a proper home." Martha stood in her doorway, her small frame somehow imposing in its rigidity. "These children have a proper home, Mr. Stevens, right here with me. Mrs. Wilson, be reasonable. You're, what, 70? How long can you possibly care for 2 growing children? The Blackwells only want what's best." "The Blackwells?" Martha interrupted, her eyes sharp. "I don't believe I mentioned them." Stevens' face flushed. "It's a manner of speaking. I represent a concerned party, that's all." "Well, you can tell your concerned party that these children aren't for sale. Good night, Mr. Stevens." Days after Stevens' visit, Rusty disappeared, mysteriously, leaving Martha and the twins more vulnerable than ever. For a week there was no sign of the chestnut stallion that had become their guardian. "I think something's happened to him," Martha confided to Catherine during her weekly visit. "He wouldn't just leave us." Catherine looked troubled. "Martha, I've been doing some research. The Blackwell's daughter Elizabeth disappeared about a year ago. The family claimed she went to Europe, but no one's heard from her since, and the timing would match with—" She glanced at the twins, now 4 months old, playing on a blanket nearby. Martha nodded slowly. "I've been putting pieces together too. There's something else." She retrieved the documents from their hiding place in her sewing basket. "Look at this birth certificate. It lists 3 babies born, not 2. Catherine's hands trembled as she examined the paper. "Triplets? So where's the 3rd baby?" "That's what we need to find out," Martha said grimly. The reunion with an old friend brought renewed hope. Dr. James Harrington, a veterinarian who had been out of town on an extended sabbatical, returned to Eagle Valley. He had been a dear friend of Martha and her late husband. "Martha Wilson, still causing trouble, I see," he said warmly when he visited her at the farmhouse. His weathered face creased into a smile as he bounced Daniel on his knee. "James, I need your help," Martha said, explaining about Rusty's disappearance. The very next day, they found Rusty in a remote canyon, injured but alive. His leg was caught in what appeared to be a trap, though hunting season was months away. Dr. Harrington carefully freed the horse and treated his wounds. "He'll be fine," he assured Martha, "but this was no accident. Someone wanted to remove your guardian angel." As he worked, recognition dawned on his face. "Martha, I know this horse. He belonged to Elizabeth Blackwell. She raised him from a moi. Colt called him Rusty because of his color. When she disappeared last year, he escaped from the Blackwell stables. Everyone thought he'd gone wild." Martha's heart raced. "James, what happened to Elizabeth?" Dr. Harrington's face darkened. "No, one knows for sure. The official story is that she ran off with some unsuitable young man. But there were rumors that she was in trouble. The kind that comes after 9 months. "She was pregnant," Martha whispered. "That was the gossip. Richard Blackwell is obsessed with the family's reputation. A scandal involving his only daughter would have been unbearable to him." The pieces began falling into place. Elizabeth Blackwell, pregnant and possibly forced into hiding by her own family. Triplets, born in secret. 2 abandoned on a dusty road, found by the very horse that had been Elizabeth's companion. But where was Elizabeth now? And what about the 3rd baby? As fall turned to winter, Martha, Catherine, and Dr. Harrington formed an unlikely alliance, carefully gathering information about the Blackwell family and Elizabeth's disappearance. They worked with caution, aware that in Eagle Valley, the Blackwells had eyes and ears everywhere. "We need to find Elizabeth," Catherine said during one of their clandestine meetings in Martha's kitchen. "She's the key to all of this." "And the 3rd child," Martha added, watching as the twins played with wooden blocks on the floor. "We can't forget there's another baby out there somewhere." Dr. Harrington nodded thoughtfully. "I have a contact. At the private hospital where the Blackwells go for medical care. If Elizabeth was treated there, my friend might be able to get information." As they strategized, Rusty stood guard outside, his leg healing well. The bond between the horse and the twins grew stronger each day. Diana, in particular, seemed to have a special connection with him, her tiny hands reaching for his nose whenever he came near. The first snow of winter fell early that year, blanketing Eagle Valley in white silence. Martha stood at her window, watching the twins sleep in their shared crib, thinking about the 3rd baby somewhere out there. Were they warm tonight? Loved? Did they have someone like Rusty watching over them? The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Sarah Blackwell, Richard's sister-in-law, arrived at Martha's door unannounced. "May I come in?" she asked, her voice cultured but her eyes nervous. "I'm not here to cause trouble, I want to help." Martha hesitated, then opened the door wider. "The kettle's just boiled." Over tea, Sarah revealed what she knew. Elizabeth was in love with a young man named Michael Cooper. He worked at our stables, that's how they met. Richard found out and fired him immediately, but it was too late. Elizabeth was already pregnant. "Where is she now?" Martha asked, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know. Richard sent her away to a private facility. He told everyone she was in Europe studying art. The last time I saw her was last Christmas, and she was heartbroken but determined to keep her baby. Babies, Martha corrected gently. She had triplets. Sarah's teacup clattered against its saucer. Triplets, she whispered, shock evident on her face. I only knew about one baby. Richard has a nurse caring for an infant at the guest house on the estate. He told the family it's the child of a distant cousin who passed in childbirth. Martha exchanged a meaningful glance with Catherine, who had been quietly taking notes. One mystery solved. They had located the third baby, but Elizabeth was still missing. What about Michael Cooper? Catherine asked. Do you know where he is now? Sarah shook her head. Richard made sure he couldn't find work anywhere in the state. Last I heard he'd gone to Montana. After Sarah left, promising to help however she could without arousing Richard's suspicion, Martha sat in contemplative silence. The twins were napping, and outside, the first snowflakes of the season were beginning to fall. She's risking a lot by coming here, Catherine observed. Martha nodded. The question is, why now? The twins are nearly 6 months old. Why did she wait so long to reach out? Dr. Harrington, who had joined them after Sarah's departure, frowned thoughtfully. Maybe something's changed. Maybe Elizabeth has finally contacted her family. Or maybe, Catherine said slowly, Richard Blackwell is planning something, and Sarah is trying to warn us. Their fears were confirmed the following week when Martha received a formal letter from the Eagle County Child Welfare Department announcing an investigation into her fitness as a guardian for the twins. The letter cited concerns about her age, the isolated location of her home, and the presence of a wild animal around small children. This is Richard Blackwell's doing, Martha said, her voice tight with anger. He's using his influence to take the twins away. But why now? Catherine wondered. And why only the twins? If he wanted to hide the existence of triplets, wouldn't he want all 3 children under his control? The answer came from an unexpected source. Edith Parker from the general store stopped by with groceries and town gossip. How you won't believe what I heard, she said, settling at Martha's kitchen table while the twins played in their playpen. Charlotte Miller, you know she cleans at the Blackwell estate. She overheard Richard on the phone talking about some inheritance. Apparently his father's will had some strange condition about any Blackwell triplets being entitled to the bulk of the family fortune. Martha and Catherine exchanged startled looks. Triplets, specifically? Catherine asked. Edith nodded vigorously. Old man Blackwell was a triplet himself, though his brothers didn't survive childhood. He was obsessed with the phenomenon, thought it made the Blackwell bloodline special. Charlotte said Richard was furious, saying something about how she must have known and planned this all along. After Edith left, Catherine paced the kitchen. It makes sense now. Richard sent Elizabeth away when he found out she was pregnant by someone he considered unsuitable, but he didn't know she was carrying triplets. And now he's discovered his father's will, Martha continued, which means those babies are entitled to the Blackwell fortune regardless of who their father is. Dr. Harrington leaned forward. So he kept one baby close, the one he could claim was a distant relation, and arranged for the other 2 to be abandoned, probably assuming they wouldn't survive. Martha's blood ran cold at the thought. But Rusty intervened. Elizabeth's horse saved her babies. And now Richard knows they're alive and with you, Catherine concluded, which means they're a threat to his control of the Blackwell fortune. The situation grew more urgent when they received news that the custody hearing was scheduled for the following month. Martha, with Catherine's help, began preparing her defense, gathering evidence of her capable care of the twins despite her age. Dr. Harrington contributed by documenting Rusty's protective behavior and gentle nature around the children, countering the accusation that he posed any danger. "This horse isn't wild," he wrote in his official statement. "He's highly intelligent and bonded to these children. Separating them would be traumatic for all involved." But their most pressing concern remained finding Elizabeth Blackwell and Michael Cooper. Without the baby's biological parents, Richard's influence over the family court would likely prevail. Catherine's investigation led her to a private medical facility in Idaho called Pinewood Retreat. It's very exclusive, she told Martha and Dr. Harrington, and it caters to wealthy families with delicate problems. Like unwanted pregnancies, Dr. Harrington surmised. Catherine nodded. I've been making calls, but they're very tight-lipped. However, I did confirm that a patient matching Elizabeth's description was there until about 7 months ago, just before the twins were born, Martha noted. Exactly. But where did she go after that? The answer came from an unexpected ally. Michael Cooper returned to Eagle Valley after receiving a letter from Sarah Blackwell explaining the situation. He arrived at Martha's farm one snowy evening, his face haggard with worry and grief. I've been searching for Elizabeth for over a year, he explained, warming his hands by Martha's fire. His eyes kept straying to the twins, asleep in their crib. I knew she was pregnant. We were planning to run away together, but Richard found out and sent her away before we could leave. Do you know where she is now? Martha asked gently. Michael's eyes filled with tears. Sarah told me Elizabeth gave birth to triplets at Pinewood. The staff there were under orders from Richard to tell her that none of the babies survived. She was devastated. His voice broke. When she found out it was a lie, that the babies were alive, she confronted Richard. That was 3 weeks ago. No one has seen her since. A heavy silence fell over the room. Finally, Catherine spoke. We need to find her before the hearing. Without her testimony, we might lose the twins to Richard. There's more, Michael said, reaching into his jacket. Elizabeth managed to send me this before she disappeared. He unfolded a letter, the handwriting hurried but elegant. She overheard Richard talking to his lawyer about the Blackwell will. Not only does it specify that triplets inherit the majority of the fortune, but it also stipulates that they must be raised together. If the triplets are separated, the inheritance goes to charity. Martha's eyes widened in understanding. So Richard kept one baby to maintain the appearance that he was honoring his father's will, while ensuring the condition could never be met by getting rid of the other two. But now all 3 babies are accounted for, Dr. Harrington pointed out. And if they're reunited, Richard loses control of the Blackwell fortune, Catherine finished. The group spent the night strategizing. With the custody hearing just weeks away, they needed to locate Elizabeth and ensure all 3 babies would be present in court. Michael, despite the risk to himself, offered to search the Blackwell estate. I know that property like the back of my hand, he insisted. If Elizabeth is being held there, I'll find her. Sarah Blackwell provided crucial help, arranging for Michael to enter the estate grounds through a rarely used service entrance. Meanwhile, Catherine worked through legal channels, ensuring that the existence of the 3rd Blackwell baby would be officially acknowledged during the hearing. As the day of the hearing approached, tension mounted. Michael returned from his search of the Blackwell estate with troubling news. Elizabeth isn't there, he reported grimly, but I found evidence she was held in the guest house recently, and I saw the 3rd baby, a boy who looks just like our Daniel. Time was running out. Where was Elizabeth? Without her testimony, Richard might still convince the court that Martha was an unfit guardian, using her age and isolated living situation against her. The breakthrough came just 3 days before the hearing. Rusty, who had been behaving strangely for days, bolted from the farm early one morning. Dr. Harrington followed on his truck, tracking the horse to an abandoned hunting cabin deep in the national forest that bordered Blackwell land. There, they found Elizabeth Blackwell, weak, but alive. She had escaped from her father's guest house and had been hiding for nearly 2 weeks, surviving on minimal supplies while trying to figure out a way to reach Michael or find her babies. Rusty, Elizabeth whispered, her hand reaching out to stroke the horse's muzzle. You've always known where to find me. Dr. Harrington helped Elizabeth into his truck, Rusty following behind as they returned to Martha's farm. The reunion between Elizabeth and Michael was tearful, but there was little time for lengthy explanations. The hearing was just days away, and they needed to prepare Elizabeth's testimony. My father will do anything to maintain control of the family fortune, Elizabeth explained, holding her twins for the first time since their birth. Her eyes were constantly drawn to them, marveling at their growth, at the tiny details of their faces. When he discovered I was pregnant, he was furious, but when he learned it was triplets, something changed. He became calculating. Catherine documented everything, building a case against Richard Blackwell that would be difficult to refute, even with his considerable influence. Sarah provided additional evidence, including recordings of Richard discussing his plans to separate the triplets permanently. "He doesn't know I have these," she explained, handing over a small digital recorder. "He's always underestimated me, thought I was too weak, too dependent on the family money to ever stand against him." The day of the hearing dawned clear and cold, a perfect Wyoming winter morning. The small courthouse in Eagle Valley was packed with spectators, the community divided but curious. Richard Blackwell sat at the front with his attorneys, his face a mask of confident authority. He barely glanced at Martha as she entered with Catherine and Dr. Harrington. Judge Eleanor Simmons, known for her fairness and immunity to influence, presided over the case. "This court will now hear evidence regarding the guardianship of the minor children currently in the care of Martha Wilson," she announced, her voice carrying through the packed room. Richard's attorney presented first, painting Martha as a well-meaning but ultimately incapable guardian due to her age and circumstances. "These children deserve a stable home with financial security and proper resources," he argued smoothly. "Mr. Blackwell, as their biological grandfather, is prepared to provide everything they need." When it was Catherine's turn, she presented the documents found in the twins' basket, the birth certificates showing triplets, and the medical records from Pinewood Retreat. "Your Honor, this case is not simply about guardianship," she explained. "It involves the deliberate separation of triplets for financial gain." A murmur ran through the courtroom. Richard Blackwell's face darkened with anger. "I call Sarah Blackwell as a witness," Catherine announced. Sarah's testimony was devastating. She detailed Richard's reaction to Elizabeth's pregnancy, his plan to send her away, and his subsequent discovery that triplets would significantly impact the Blackwell inheritance. "He saw the babies as obstacles, not as his grandchildren," she concluded, her voice steady despite her brother-in-law's glare. Richard's attorney objected repeatedly, but Judge Simmons allowed the testimony to continue, her expression growing increasingly grave. The climax occurred when, during a brief recess, the courthouse doors swung open and Rusty entered the packed room, causing a stir among the spectators. Behind him came Elizabeth, carrying Daniel and Michael with Diana in his arms. The symbolism was immediate and powerful. People remembered the horse, the images, the stories. "Order!" Judge Simmons called, though she herself seemed stunned by the entrance. Elizabeth took the stand, her voice clear despite her obvious nervousness. "My name is Elizabeth Blackwell Cooper. I married Michael Cooper in a private ceremony last year, against my father's wishes. These twins, Daniel and Diana, are two of our triplets, along with their brother David, who is currently being held at my father's estate." She recounted her pregnancy, her father's manipulation, and the heartbreaking lie that her babies had not survived. "When I discovered they were alive, I confronted my father. He had me confined to the guest house, separated from my husband and my children." Richard Blackwell stood abruptly. "This is preposterous. The girl is unstable, has been for years. These delusions about marriage and mistreatment—" "Mr. Blackwell," Judge Simmons interrupted sharply, "you will have your chance to speak. For now, I advise you to sit down and remain silent." Catherine submitted the final piece of evidence, the recording Sarah had provided, in which Richard could clearly be heard discussing how to permanently separate the triplets to ensure his control of the Blackwell fortune. The courtroom fell silent as the recording played. Richard's face grew pale, his confident demeanor crumbling as his own voice condemned him. "In light of this evidence," Judge Simmons declared, "this court orders that the third child, David Cooper Blackwell, be immediately brought to this courthouse. Sheriff Dawson, please accompany Mr. Michael Cooper to the Blackwell estate to retrieve the child." Michael handed Diana to Elizabeth and left with the sheriff. The courtroom waited in tense silence for nearly an hour before they returned, Michael cradling a baby boy identical to Daniel in every way. Judge Simmons surveyed the assembled parties, her decision already clear in her expression. This court finds that Richard Blackwell has acted against the best interests of these children from the moment of their conception. Custody of all 3 children is awarded to their biological parents, Elizabeth and Michael Cooper. A cheer erupted from Martha's supporters. Elizabeth embraced Martha tearfully. "You saved them," she whispered. "You and Rusty saved our babies." Richard Blackwell stormed out of the courtroom, his attorneys hurrying after him. The battle was won, but everyone knew that a man of his influence wouldn't accept defeat easily. In the following days, Elizabeth and Michael moved into Martha's farmhouse temporarily, creating a makeshift nursery for the triplets. The babies thrived together, their bond immediate and profound. David, who had been isolated and cared for primarily by hired nurses, blossomed under the attention of his parents and siblings. "It's like they recognize each other," Elizabeth marveled, watching the 3 babies interact. "They know they belong together." Martha observed the young family with satisfaction, though a twinge of sadness touched her heart. She had grown to love the twins as her own, but she knew they belonged with their parents and their brother. As if sensing her thoughts, Elizabeth approached her one evening as she rocked David to sleep. "Martha, Michael and I have been talking. We've decided to stay in Eagle Valley and we'd like to buy the old Henderson property next to yours." Martha looked up in surprise. "You would stay here? After everything that happened?" Elizabeth nodded firmly. "This is where our family was saved. Besides, the children need their grandmother nearby." "Grandmother?" Martha repeated, her voice catching. "We'd be honored if you would consider being their adoptive grandmother," Michael said, joining them. "You gave them life, Martha. You're as much their family as we are." In the end, justice was served not in the traditional sense, but in the bonds formed and strengthened through adversity. The Blackwell inheritance was placed in a trust for the triplets, with Elizabeth and Sarah as trustees. Richard Blackwell, his reputation damaged by the public scandal, retreated to his estate. His influence in Eagle Valley significantly diminished. For Martha, the farmhouse that had once seemed too quiet after her husband's passing now rang with the laughter of children. Elizabeth and Michael restored the Henderson property, creating a home just a short walk from Martha's. And Rusty, the horse who had started it all, roamed freely between the 2 properties, still the faithful guardian of the children he had saved. On warm afternoons, he could often be found standing watch as the triplets played in the yard, his intelligent eyes alert but peaceful. 1 year after the hearing, on a perfect summer day, the community gathered at Martha's farm to celebrate the triplets' 2nd birthday. Even those who had once sided with Richard Blackwell came, curiosity and the passage of time softening old divisions. "I never thought I'd see this day," Martha confided to Dr. Harrington as they watched the children toddle after Rusty in the pasture, their parents hovering nearby. "A family made whole against all odds." "It wasn't just odds they overcame," he replied, patting her hand. "It was power and greed, and they won because they had something stronger." "Love?" Martha suggested with a smile. "Yes, love," he agreed. "But also you, Martha Wilson. Your courage gave them the chance they needed." As twilight fell and guests departed, Elizabeth found Martha sitting on the porch, watching the last rays of sunlight painting the distant mountains. "When I was held at my father's estate, what kept me going was knowing my babies were out there. Somewhere?" Elizabeth said softly. "I never imagined they'd found someone like you." Martha reached for the younger woman's hand. "I think they found me because of Rusty. He knew exactly what he was doing." As if on cue, Rusty approached the porch, the 3 children trailing sleepily behind him like ducklings following their mother. Elizabeth laughed, gathering up David while Martha lifted Diana and Michael scooped up Daniel. "Some might call it coincidence," Michael said, "but I think it was meant to be." Martha nodded, looking out over the land that had seen so much drama and now witnessed such peace. "In Eagle Valley, we know better than to question the wisdom of horses," she said with a wink, "especially ones with a mission." The triplets, safe in loving arms, gazed up at the first stars appearing in the Wyoming sky, their future now as bright and promising as the lights beginning to speckle the darkness. Fim da Historia. Dear listeners, we hope that the story of Martha, Rusty and the Blackwell triplets has touched your hearts. For more emotional journeys like this one, we've prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories. Find it by clicking on the link to your left. If you enjoyed this tale of family, courage and unconditional love, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. Every day we bring you unique stories that explore life's complexities in all their wonder. We can't wait to see you in the comments. Tell us which character resonated with you the most, and what other stories you'd like to hear in the future.